Class is now in session. This is the State of Choice podcast.
Welcome back to the State of Choice podcast. I'm your host, Ed Tarnowski, also known as Ed with Ed Choice. To start us off today, I have to acknowledge something really exciting. My colleague, Nathan Sanders, did just get engaged, and I have to congratulate him, and I hope you guys will go congratulate him as well on social media. So congratulations, Nathan. That was very new this weekend.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. But yeah, with me today are the P&A directors as usual. We have Katherine Schultz, we have Nathan Sanders, and Aaron Gillham. We have a lot to talk about on this episode in all different regions of the country. I'm just going to jump right in with Texas. Katherine, we finally, Texas has not only school choice, but school choice with universal eligibility. Katherine, tell us about the exciting weekend you had.
Absolutely, Ed. Well, what a monumentous step forward for school choice in our nation. So much exciting stuff had happened in Texas in the last few weeks. So Governor Abbott on Saturday signed Senate Bill 2, which will be the largest one-day program of school choice that we have seen nationally. It's huge. We are looking at a universally eligible program. So that means any student in Texas can apply for this program. And it's a huge $1 billion program. The legislature has appropriated $1 billion towards this, which can roughly come out to around 80,000 scholarships for students. This is just a huge step for our state. You know, Texas has had the fight for school choice for the last 30 years. Robert Enlow, our CEO, talked this weekend at the bill signing about the first time he came to Texas, which was in 1997 with, of course, our founder, Milton Friedman, trying to rally support for school choice. So we have come full circle. I will say on Saturday before the bill signing, Robert and I and a few others went over to the Driscoll Hotel, which is where Robert and Milton had their first meeting to talk about school choice in Texas 30 years ago. It was very nice to cheers to a story kind of coming full circle. And then on Saturday, we were able to celebrate with a ton of families and children who will be impacted by this bill at the governor's mansion. Governor Abbott was kind enough to invite the entire coalition. We got to celebrate on the mansion grounds and watch him sign Senate Bill 2 into law. So it was very exciting. Also, one of the very cool things that Governor Abbott did was with the pen that he signed Senate Bill 2, he threw that pen into a giant basket of pens. And as people were leaving, each person got a pen so that we were all a part of the signing of SB 2. It was very cool. A lot of the kids were very excited about this. But, you know, it was also an emotional thing. We have just seen this fight go on and get so ugly over the last 4 years. And so it's so nice that now we get to take a step forward, finally returning Texas to where she belongs, which is leading the nation in innovation. And finally, that innovation can catch up in Texas in school choice. And so we're very excited. It was an exciting Saturday for sure.
That's right. I know Texas is finally is able to compete with its competitors like Florida, Arizona. They've had a universal for a while, and now it's finally finally can compete on education policy. It's really exciting, and I love the history about Milton. Texas is special to us at Ed Choice for a lot of reasons, and this is one of the biggest ones. Like you said, full circle. So really amazing news, and it will significantly increase just the percentage of kids nationwide who have access to choice. So really monumental moment for America. Now I'm going to shift over to Nathan. We do have some stuff going on in the Southeast. We had a lot of action last year, so I know you might have not heard as many big headlines about new big universal programs, but things are still happening. So Nathan, tell us a little bit about what's going on in your states. Let's start with South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year was a huge year for the Southeast with states like Alabama and Louisiana passing and enacting universal school choice. This year, no states passing or enacting universal school choice, but still some awesome things to celebrate. So, for example, in South Carolina, just last week, the governor signed S62, Senate Bill 62, and that was the Education Trust Fund program, which is just an education savings account. So if those listening remember last fall, the South Carolina State Supreme Court essentially overturned the program by saying that parents weren't able to use the dollars for private school tuition, full-time tuition, which was about 90-something% of the families on this program. So virtually ripping the program away from families. And thankfully, due to philanthropists and private donors, particularly Jeff Yass and others, they fundraised and they donated lots of money to the program privately last year so that the students enrolled in the 24-25 school year could finish out their school year without having the instability of moving to another school. So which was awesome. But with that, the South Carolina General Assembly basically told families, hey, we're going to fix this. Come legislative session, we're going to do our duty and we're going to fix this. So after many iterations and amendments, the both chambers finally came together and compromised on not quite a universal program, but still an expansion from the previous program, which is awesome and something to celebrate. Most notably, they cleverly added multiple funding streams for the program, which allegedly, I'm no lawyer, but will help satisfy the court ruling from last year. They also removed the prior public requirement. The previous program had a prior public school requirement. They removed that, which automatically enables so many more students in South Carolina to be eligible for the program. And then they also increased the eligibility requirement from a cap at 300% from the previous program to now a cap of 500%. So the back of the napkin math, if you will, is about 85% of students will be eligible after next year in the state, which is something to celebrate. Props to both chambers of the General Assembly. Props to the governor for signing it very quickly. So that's a done deal in South Carolina. God willing, the courts will, uphold the law, and the students will be able to be served by this program. Wonderful, wonderful news in South Carolina. Props to all the advocates, the parents, and the philanthropists in the state. Also, notable news as of today, the Missouri General Assembly have passed the budget, which includes $50 million new public dollars for the Mill Scholars Program, which is a tax credit ESA. So if just a few weeks ago, the Senate committee that heard the budget bill actually removed the funding, and lots of advocates and parents urged lawmakers to add it back in during conference committee, which they did just last night. And then today, quickly, the House and the Senate both passed the budget bill, and it now heads to the governor, and he has more than indicated that he will sign it. The $50 million was sort of his initiative to begin with. So a huge win for Missouri families that now they'll have many more families participate in this program because of this funding, which is huge, and also sets the stage for the future to hopefully expand out that program to universal eligibility where it's all kids and all the dollars and all the options. So super exciting news out of Missouri. Other than that, in my world, Ed, Louisiana, they just got started a couple weeks ago. It'll be a fight for the funding, another funding fight for the Gator Scholarship Program. The governor has indicated he wants about $94 million to fund, which is not fully fund compared to the almost 40,000 applications from a couple weeks ago, which is just outstanding. But it's still something. Some other folks, like the Senate president, have indicated that they don't want to spend that much in the budget due to some other fiscal issues the state's dealing with. So it'll be up to the advocates, the parents, and the governor and folks that support it in the legislature to fight for that funding and get as many families as we can funded for the Gator program. So more to come later this month and next month on what that looks like. But other than that, overall, exciting stuff coming from my states, and I'm super excited for this summer.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nathan. So South Carolina inching closer to universal, not quite there yet, but really exciting that they're restoring the tuition as used for the program. It's the main part of the program. So really important stuff, and really happy to see families getting access to True Choice again. And now moving on over to Aaron's region. So Aaron's region shined very early in the session. So he has not as much to cover as Katherine and Nathan this time, but there was a little bit of a setback that we did see up in North Dakota. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about what happened over there?
Of course, yeah, and great to be on with everyone again, and to our listeners. You got to shine bright when session is so short, as is the case with Wyoming. Yeah, from the Midwest and Mountain West, we've seen a lot of action, and we're hoping for some additional kind of success in the Plains states. The Dakotas showing some early promise, but a bill in South Dakota fizzled out pretty early in session, and then North Dakota actually had several kind of competing, simultaneous school choice initiatives that were put forward, and slowly but surely, one by one, they kind of fell by the wayside. Two in particular endured through most of session, really right up until the end. In fact, North Dakota just went sine die in the early hours this past Sunday. And unfortunately, they are left without another year without a private school choice program. I do believe they passed a charter school program, so they do have that in place. But they remain perhaps the only, or depending on how we're qualifying Nebraska these days, unfortunately because of their ballot initiative recently. But North Dakota otherwise is the only only Republican trifecta with no private school choice programs. So we were disappointed in the end result. How did we get there is a little bit more convoluted for our listeners that may not have been in the weeds as much as we were, kind of following the day-to-day or the week-by-week blows through session. So as we know, the previous governor was tapped by the Trump administration and he was out. So we have a new governor in North Dakota now, Governor Armstrong, and a new lieutenant governor. And then there was a lot of interest and discussion early on, both from the executive branch and the legislative branch, about getting something done on the school choice initiatives, as there's so much momentum across the country. So yeah, some competing initiatives early. The two bills that ended up kind of duking it out towards the end, one coming and originating from the Senate, the other originating from the House, just similar in some regards, but had some different kind of viewpoints, I think is really the best way to put it. So really the short story of what was a long tail was that the governor and the executive branch seemed to be getting behind the Senate bill put forward by Senator Michelle Axman. And it had kind of an interesting component in it, in that it also provided quite a bit of funding for public school students. So students that remained in public schools would receive funds alongside of a more traditional education savings account structure that the private school side would receive. But because there were so many students included, literally all students, it had quite a large fiscal note, which sat uneasy with some legislators who were a little bit leery about spending that kind of money or projecting that kind of money. And instead of putting a cap on the program, it kind of just sat out there with this large fiscal note for quite some time. And it just made for kind of a difficult discussion, I think, around that bill. I think that was a big piece of it. Also, I think a lot of legislators, and maybe we would argue rightfully so, were thinking of these bills as private school choice bills. And so since Senate Bill 2400 had this public school component, that also provided some difficult discussions and some kind of convoluted discussions among legislators who were trying to sort out what was the appropriate road to take for a first-time initiative in the state. On the House side, it was Representative Ben Koppelman was the primary sponsor there. And again, also an education savings account bill, did not have a public school component. So it was a little bit more traditional in the way we think about education savings accounts. And in fact, he also got input from the homeschool community and took them out along the kind of debate process as well. So kind of in and out of different committees, the education committees, the appropriations committees, there was some different discussions with that bill. And one other kind of layer to this is that the Department for Public Instruction kind of kept putting out this idea that there would be very, very large uptake of the program. In fact, at one point, there was an assumption being put forward that 100% of students eligible would take on the program in the first year. So that, of course, was putting out a very large fiscal note for legislators to mull over, which didn't sit well with folks. So it was just a lot of jockeying. And unfortunately, I think in part the calendar was running short and people felt very very unsure kind of how to proceed with these two bills still kind of out there side by side until the end. What ended up actually happening was that the House bill received a positive vote out of the Senate when it went over there. They did make some tweaks to it. It ended up getting amended on the Senate floor, initially by the Senate Appropriations Committee, and then on the Senate floor, went back to the House. They ended up just concurring, did not have any qualms necessarily with the Senate amendments. And then when it went to the governor's desk, it did receive a pretty expeditious veto. And we were a little bit surprised to see that, because we thought that the first bill that got to the governor's desk he might embrace, just to ensure that the state had a program in place. But again, the preference that had kind of been signaled from the executive branch, from the governor's office, was to support the Senate bill. And I think that's what he was banking on, is that if the House bill did not succeed, the Senate bill would still be out there to get passed. Well, the House didn't see it that way, and ultimately, a few days later, the House rejected the Senate bill, as they had still been kind of sitting on it and waiting to vote on it to see what the governor did with their bill. So in the end, both bills died, and again, the state of North Dakota is left without any private school choice programs. I think one takeaway from this, as especially the four of us that are involved, and maybe a lot of our listeners that are involved in the education freedom movement, and many have been involved for quite some time, it might be assumed that a lot of folks kind of understand the issue better than they do because there is so much momentum nationwide. And in fact, there is still a lot of learning to be done, a lot of educating to be done. And that is no slight to any individual or any group of people or any particular state for that matter. I think there's just a need to continue to talk through a lot of these issues that surround school choice. A lot of the questions that we may feel like have been tackled over and over again are still questions that legislators have in the states, whether it's fiscal issues or accountability issues or how best to target certain subsections of the constituency, how to prioritize maybe those that are less fortunate or special needs, or what's the right approach. And so it is important that we continue to talk about those items because people are still learning, people are still taking this up for the first time. So I think there's going to be some discussion, obviously a lot of discussion, I think, in the next 2 years. North Dakota is one of those states that does not convene their legislature every year. So they will not be back until 2027 unless there is some special session to take this up. So that's going to be something where hopefully, here at Ed Choice, we can bring them to our legislative summits and we can get them plugged into other educational opportunities to continue to discuss the way we have sort of seen this issue evolve and what might be some options for them going forward if they want to proceed with the education savings account route, or as Idaho this year has passed a refundable tax credit, that might look appealing to a state like North Dakota, as they do have an income tax, and that would be an option for them to take up if they wanted to try something that route. But ongoing discussion, ongoing education around this certainly going to be important as we look to help them going forward. I know they don't like being in this situation. A lot of great coalition partners that we worked with on the ground there, great legislators. Everybody was very well meaning in this discussion and in this debate as far as we can tell, and we definitely know they want to see their state added to our map and to others' maps on the education choice front. So hope to help them get there, and we want to continue to be a resource for them as questions arise.
Yeah, thank you for that update, Aaron. And I certainly think there is still a lot of opportunity for North Dakota going forward. We have some amazing school choice champions up there. So I'm looking forward to the next 2 years to see what North Dakota does.
Hey, Ed, can I add two things to my update before you go into yours real quick?
Yeah, totally.
So two things I forgot to mention that are worth celebrating. In Alabama, the education budget funding committees this session fully funded and more the Alabama Choose Act. So statute there says they have to at least fund $100 million. They had a great number of applications. I think it was the mid 30,000s, which is just amazing. I think 36,000. And so they basically gave it an additional $80 million to fully fund these applications. So going into the first year, it'll be fully funded with the applications, which is something to celebrate. The governor's already signed those budget bills. And so it's a done deal. So big props to our friends over in Alabama. And then secondly, I want to mention Oklahoma. So our fearless leader, Joey, has been working on this the last few weeks. So there was an effort by leadership in Oklahoma regarding the Oklahoma refundable tax credit to sort of restrict access from schools and students by kind of maneuvering and editing the accreditation process and some requirements there that would essentially take off 30 plus schools from participating in the program, which equated to over 1,000 students out of the program this coming up year. And so it was a super big red flag, lots of coalition partners. I think there was a coalition letter of multiple dozens organizations trying to fight this. In the end, we got them to essentially strip that language. And so those schools and students lived to see another day. And so big props to Joey, big props to Yes Every Kid. I know they were a huge partner in that effort. And so some awesome news out of Oklahoma as well.
Oh, definitely excellent news out of Oklahoma. I'm glad you brought that up, Nathan. And because this continues to be a growing concern across the country, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing parents over bureaucracy. And we are seeing some legislators start to flirt with this idea of added regulations, maybe well-intentioned, but misguided and often really problematic for families' access to choice. So that was really great news out of Oklahoma. And just to wrap us up here, I'm going to give a little bit of an update of my own from my region. New Hampshire continues to negotiate a form of universal choice. The House had their version, the Senate has their version, the governor has her version. And they're all currently working really hard all together to come up with something that they can all agree on, some kind of in agreement. So New Hampshire can make sure they do get to universal. We did see just this week the House passed an amended version of the Senate bill, and the Senate recently had a hearing on the House version of universal, which I had the opportunity to testify at, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, New Hampshire, the negotiations in New Hampshire remain complex. I expect a bigger update on the next episode, but it remains a really exciting time out there. We love to hear that people are talking and that they're just trying to come to a plan that's best for parents. So it's something to watch really closely, and I still remain optimistic. And just another small update, just from Pennsylvania, we did see Lifeline scholarships or past scholarships that low-income, low-performing schools ESA program advanced out of the Senate Education Committee. So we're still watching that to see what happens in Pennsylvania. Remember, a couple of years ago, when Governor Josh Shapiro was running, he endorsed the Lifeline scholarships plan. So we're watching that closely, to be seen if the House is interested in moving on something like that, if the House leadership is interested in moving. But great news to see it advance out of the Senate Education Committee. That'll be all for us today. Thank you for joining. For more information on EdChoice and our research, please feel free to visit edchoice.org. I'm your host, Ed Tarnowski, also known as Ed with EdChoice. I hope you'll join us next time.